It was a bright, crisp Monday morning when Emma got the news that would change everything. She was a 17-year-old high school senior, known for her undeniable skill on the cheerleading squad. Her morning started just like any other, rushing to get ready, grabbing her backpack, and heading to school. Her friends had been teasing her about the upcoming regional cheer competition, but Emma was focused, already thinking about the routine she'd been perfecting for months. She was determined to make it the best, knowing this was her last year. Cheerleading was her passion, the thing that gave her life purpose after school, and the chance to escape the pressures of daily life. Emma had always been the picture of health and energy, with a dream of earning a college scholarship for cheerleading. Her mother had always encouraged her to aim high, telling her that she had the talent to go far. She wasn't popular in the traditional sense, but on the cheerleading squad, she was a star. Her coach, Mr. Carter, was a tough but fair leader who demanded excellence. He pushed them hard but always respected the commitment each cheerleader put into the team. The squad, though competitive, had an unspoken bond of unity. Emma thrived in that environment. But the morning of the announcement, Emma woke up with a feeling of unease she couldn't shake. She had been feeling different lately, a little more tired than usual, some strange cramps here and there. She chalked it up to stress. It wasn't uncommon for high school students to be overwhelmed, especially seniors trying to juggle academics, extracurriculars, and a looming future. Still, something didn't feel right. That afternoon, after a routine doctor's appointment, Emma received the confirmation that no one ever expects. She was pregnant. At first, Emma's mind spun in a blur of disbelief. Her first instinct was to keep it to herself. She knew her friends wouldn't understand, and the last thing she wanted was to let down her coach and teammates. Her dreams of cheerleading seemed suddenly out of reach, her focus divided between the new life growing inside her and the demanding cheerleading routines. She thought of the long hours of practice ahead and the looming competition, where her team needed to be at its best. Emma's heart weighed heavy as she tried to process what had just been revealed to her. She decided to keep the news to herself for a while, hoping the feeling of panic would subside. But days turned into weeks, and the reality of her pregnancy began to show, not just in her body, but in her behavior. Emma found herself becoming more exhausted at practice, and it wasn't long before her coach noticed. He asked her if she was all right, and after some hesitation, Emma finally confessed. Coach Carter had always been someone she looked up to. He had helped shape her into the cheerleader she was, pushing her to be stronger and more determined than she ever thought possible. But as soon as she told him, she knew something was wrong. His face hardened, and for a moment, she could see the wheels turning in his mind. She wasn't sure if it was the weight of her announcement or his own personal beliefs about cheerleading, but she could feel the shift. "Emma, I don't know how to handle this," Coach Carter said, his voice tight. He paced for a moment before turning back to her. "This team requires 100% commitment. You're pregnant now, and I can't allow that to take away from what we've worked for. We're going for the championship this year, and I can't afford distractions." His words stung more than she could have imagined. The betrayal was sharper than the shock. She had trusted him, believed that he'd stand by her no matter what. But in that moment, Emma understood that her coach had made up his mind. He wasn't willing to bend the rules, even for her. The weight of his words felt heavier than the pregnancy itself, as though her future, both in cheerleading and in her personal life, was being cast aside. "Emma, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to step down from the squad," he said, his tone final, leaving no room for discussion. "You're just not going to be able to keep up with practice, and I can't risk it affecting the team's performance." Emma was stunned, unable to respond right away. Her breath caught in her throat as she stood there, trying to make sense of it. She had worked so hard for this moment, and now it was slipping away. This wasn't just a decision about cheerleading. It felt like a decision about her entire future. She had dreamed of competing at the regional competition and hoped to secure a scholarship, but those dreams now seemed impossible. "Coach," Emma said, her voice trembling. "I can do this. I can still help the team. I'll work harder than ever." But Coach Carter just shook his head. "I'm sorry, Emma, but it's not the same. You've got other things to focus on now. I hope you understand." As Emma left the gym that day, her heart shattered. The people she had trusted most had let her down. She didn't know where to turn next. This wasn't just about losing a spot on the team. It felt like losing everything. It was a moment of clarity that made her realize how little control she had over her own future. Her world was spiraling, and she didn't know how to stop it. The first thing Emma did when she got home was to break the news to her mom. The weight of the decision seemed too heavy for her to bear alone. Her mom's reaction was the exact opposite of what she had feared. Instead of anger, her mother's face softened with empathy. "I don't care about your cheerleading career, honey," she said, pulling Emma into a hug. "You're my daughter, and we'll figure this out together. Whatever happens next, I'll be here for you." But the harshness of Coach Carter's decision lingered, gnawing at Emma. She had to make a choice: accept this new reality or fight back. Would she give up her dreams of cheerleading, or would she find a way to prove everyone wrong? In the days that followed, Emma struggled with the weight of Coach Carter's decision. She was devastated, but as the initial shock began to wear off, a fiery determination started to take root. This wasn't just about cheerleading anymore. It was about proving to herself, and everyone else, that she could still make it. She spent hours reflecting on what had happened. Emma had always been taught to give her best, no matter the odds, and she wasn't about to let one setback define her. But at the same time, a gnawing question haunted her. Was she being naive? Could she really continue cheerleading while pregnant? And even if she could, would anyone accept her back after being kicked off the team? Her friends at school weren't sure how to respond. Some supported her, telling her that she was strong and would find a way to keep going. Others, however, seemed uncertain. One by one, her teammates started avoiding her, unsure of how to react to the situation. There were whispers in the hallways, and though Emma tried to ignore them, they stung more than she could admit. Her former teammates, once her closest allies, were now unsure of what to think. They hadn't signed up for this kind of drama, and with regionals just around the corner, they didn't want anything to disrupt their focus. As for Coach Carter, his decision had caused a ripple effect that spread far beyond Emma. The other cheerleaders, who had always respected him, began to question whether they could trust him as a leader. It wasn't just Emma's future that seemed uncertain now, but the future of the entire team. Coach Carter was known for his strict discipline, but this move felt personal. Many wondered if he had made this decision out of genuine concern for the team, or if it was rooted in his own discomfort with the situation. It wasn't long before the consequences of Coach Carter's actions started to weigh on him. Despite his initial confidence that he had made the right choice, doubts began to creep in. Every time he saw Emma's empty spot on the sidelines during practice, a pang of regret shot through him. He had acted quickly, thinking he was doing what was best for the team. But now, seeing the impact of his decision on the morale of the squad, he began to question himself. He wasn't used to feeling unsure. He was the coach, the one everyone looked to for guidance. And yet here he was, unsure if he had made the right call. The team's dynamics began to change. Emma's absence left a noticeable gap in the group's energy. The other cheerleaders, though still determined to win, no longer felt the same drive they once had. Emma had been the heart of the squad. Her presence, her energy, had fueled the team during practices and games. Without her, everything felt off, and some of the other cheerleaders started to voice their concerns. They missed her. They wanted her back. One afternoon, as practice was winding down, a few of Emma's closest friends approached Coach Carter. They had spent weeks in the locker room talking about the decision and how it had affected them. They didn't want to confront him in an aggressive way, but the tension was building, and they couldn't ignore it any longer. "Coach, Sarah, one of the team captains, said cautiously, "I think we need to talk about Emma." Coach Carter turned to face her, sensing the weight in her voice. "What about her? We can't keep going like this. We need Emma back. This team, it's just not the same without her," Sarah said, her voice tight with emotion. The other cheerleaders nodded in agreement. They could feel the dissonance too. The chemistry that had once been so electric was now replaced with a sense of emptiness. Coach Carter sighed, his thoughts spinning. The loyalty from his team was clear, but so was the reality of the situation. Could he admit that he might have made a mistake? Would bringing Emma back jeopardize their chances at the competition? Or worse, would it show weakness in front of his team? After a long pause, Coach Carter looked at them, his expression hardening. "I made a decision for the good of the team. I stand by it." But as he said it, the doubt in his eyes betrayed him. Deep down, he wasn't as sure as he had been that day Emma had walked into his office with the news of her pregnancy. He wasn't just concerned about her pregnancy affecting her performance. He was also worried about how the community would react, about how the other parents and faculty members would judge his decision. In the back of his mind, he feared that allowing Emma to return would set a precedent that he wasn't prepared for. But another part of him, the part that had always valued loyalty and commitment, wondered if he was making a mistake. That night, as Coach Carter lay in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about Emma. He replayed their conversation over and over in his head, remembering how her eyes had welled up with tears when he told her she was off the team. He couldn't forget the way she had pleaded with him, telling him she was still capable of performing, that her pregnancy didn't define her abilities. He also remembered the way her teammates had reacted to her absence. They missed her, and more importantly, they needed her. He had seen it in their eyes during practice. Their focus was slipping, their energy was low. Emma was a core part of the team, and by removing her, he had unwittingly created a void that no one could fill. The next day, Coach Carter made the decision to call Emma. He had to see her again, to talk to her face to face. There was no other way to fix this. He needed to apologize, to admit that maybe his decision had been driven more by fear and pride than reason. He wasn't sure how Emma would react. She might not even want to come back to the team after the way he had treated her. But for the first time in a long while, Coach Carter realized that his decision wasn't just about the team's success. It was about leadership, about doing what was right even when it wasn't the easiest path. When he called Emma, the conversation was tense, but something shifted between them. There was an understanding that hadn't been there before. Emma listened to him, and for the first time, he heard the vulnerability in her voice. She wasn't just asking to return to the team for the glory. She was asking for the chance to prove to herself, and to him, that she could still be valuable, even in the midst of everything changing in her life. "I just want the chance to prove I'm not giving up," Emma said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I can still contribute. I won't let you down." In that moment, Coach Carter knew he had made the right call. He was going to bring her back. It wasn't going to be easy, but if anyone could find a way to make it work, it was Emma. And maybe, just maybe, he had been wrong all along about what it meant to be a leader. The decision to bring Emma back to the team wasn't an easy one, but Coach Carter knew it was the right choice. It was a Wednesday afternoon when he made the call to the squad, gathering everyone after practice to address the situation. The tension in the air was palpable. No one knew what to expect, and Emma wasn't sure if the rest of the team would accept her back. After all, she had been kicked off for something that was beyond her control. Her pregnancy was something she had never planned for, but it had forced her to face the reality that her life was changing in ways she couldn't have predicted. As Coach Carter stood in front of the team, his eyes darting between the cheerleaders, it was clear that he was struggling with the decision. He wasn't used to admitting mistakes. He had always been the one in control, the one who set the tone for the team. But this time, things were different. The atmosphere had shifted. The chemistry that had once been so seamless had fractured, and it wasn't just Emma's absence that caused it. It was the way the team was divided in their loyalty to both her and to him. Some of the girls had supported Emma right from the start, but others felt torn between their respect for the coach and their sympathy for their teammate. "All right, girls," Coach Carter began, his voice firm but with an underlying edge of uncertainty. "I've made a decision. Emma is coming back to the team." The room fell silent. No one spoke for a moment. The words hung in the air, heavy and thick. Emma could feel the eyes of her teammates on her, some of them in disbelief, others unsure about how to react. She stood at the back of the group, waiting for a response that she wasn't sure she could handle. She had always believed that she belonged with this team, that they were like family to her. But now, after everything that had happened, she wasn't sure if she would ever fit in the same way again. Coach Carter continued, trying to steady his nerves. "I realize I made a mistake in asking Emma to leave, and I've been thinking a lot about what's best for this team and for her. She's not just a cheerleader. She's a part of this family. We need her, and I've come to see that. We've been through a lot together, and I want us to finish the season strong. That means supporting each other, no matter what." The murmurs began. Some of the girls nodded, others exchanged glances, but one voice cut through the tension like a sharp knife. "Do you really think she can keep up with us now?" One of the senior cheerleaders, Kelsey, asked. Her voice wasn't malicious, but it was laced with doubt. "I mean, she's pregnant. How is she going to keep up with the routines?" The question hung in the air, and Emma's heart sank. She had heard whispers like this before. She knew there were people who doubted her, who thought her pregnancy would slow her down or make her a liability to the team. But she had spent days practicing, determined to prove that she was just as capable as she had been before. "I'm not asking to be treated differently," Emma said, her voice cutting through the tension. She stood up taller, feeling a surge of confidence she hadn't felt in weeks. "I'm here to work just as hard as everyone else. I'm not going to let this stop me. I can still do this." For a moment, there was silence. The other girls exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. But Emma could see something shifting in their eyes. She wasn't just asking for their acceptance. She was demanding it. She wasn't going to let her circumstances define her. Coach Carter nodded, looking at the girls, then back at Emma. "That's what I needed to hear. You're not giving up, and neither should we." And just like that, Emma was back on the team. But the journey ahead wasn't going to be easy. Her return didn't magically erase the tension that had built up over the weeks. In fact, it only highlighted the divisions that had begun to form within the squad. While some girls were genuinely happy to see Emma back, others remained uncertain. They were unsure about how to welcome her, whether they should accept the coach's decision, or whether it was the right one. As practices resumed, Emma could feel the change in the air. There were moments of camaraderie, but also moments of coldness. It wasn't as simple as just returning to cheerleading. Emma had to rebuild her place on the team, and that meant proving herself all over again. Each practice became a test of endurance. Emma had to push herself harder than ever before. Her body was changing, and it wasn't as easy to keep up with the demanding routines as it had been before. For a moment, she almost felt dizzy. But then, as the music started, everything clicked into place. The choreography she had rehearsed 1,000 times was now fluid, effortless, her body responding without hesitation. She could feel the team moving in perfect harmony, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly part of something again. Her pregnancy, once a source of doubt and fear, now felt like a badge of honor. It didn't define her performance, it empowered her. There was one moment, during the hardest lift of the routine, when Emma faltered slightly. Her body, tired from the strain of pregnancy and practice, seemed to hesitate for a fraction of a second. It was a split-second lapse, but to her, it felt like an eternity. The crowd held its breath, and Emma's heart pounded in her chest. But then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw Coach Carter. He was standing at the edge of the mat, his eyes locked on her. In that instant, something clicked in her. She wasn't just doing this for the team, for Coach Carter, or even for the competition. She was doing this for herself. With a surge of strength, Emma pushed through the fatigue and completed the lift flawlessly. The crowd erupted into applause, and for a moment, Everything else disappeared. It was just her and the team, working together to pull off something incredible. They nailed the rest of the routine with precision, each move more in sync than the last. By the time they finished, the gym was filled with the sound of cheering and clapping, the energy in the room electrifying. As they walked off the mat, Emma felt a rush of relief and pride. She had done it. But as the team gathered backstage, there was an unexpected silence. They had just performed their best routine of the season, yet something was off. Coach Carter looked at them with a mix of pride and concern. "We did great," he said, his voice full of admiration. "But we all know that our success isn't just measured by what happens on the mat today. It's about how we handle what's to come." Emma could feel the weight of his words, and she knew exactly what he meant. This wasn't just about winning a trophy. It was about what had been at stake over the last few weeks. Trust, respect, and the way the team had come together after all the challenges. But what Coach Carter didn't know was that the biggest change wasn't in their performance. It was in their bond. Emma had already won something far greater than a gold medal that day. She had won back her place, not just in the team, but in their hearts. As the scores came in, the team waited with bated breath. They had done everything they could, given it their all, but the result was still uncertain. When the announcer finally called out their team name, it was like time stopped. They hadn't won first place, but they had placed higher than they ever expected. The cheerleaders erupted in cheers, their excitement contagious. Coach Carter smiled, his eyes twinkling with pride. But there was something else there, too, something deeper. Emma stood off to the side, watching her teammates celebrate, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had proved everyone wrong. She had proven that she wasn't just a pregnant teenager. She was a competitor. She was part of this team, and nothing could take that away from her. But as the team celebrated their hard-fought victory, Emma knew there was more to the story. The true victory wasn't the medal they had earned. It was the transformation they had all gone through. From the moment Coach Carter had kicked her off the team to this very moment, everything had changed. She had faced every challenge head-on, and so had her teammates. And in doing so, they had learned something far more valuable than a shiny trophy. They had learned the power of second chances, of resilience, and of standing together, no matter the obstacles. As the competition wound down, Emma stood outside the gym, looking up at the stars. The night felt peaceful, the air cool and crisp. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, and there would be doubts. But for the first time in a long while, Emma felt ready to face whatever came next. The victory wasn't in the result of the competition. It was in the journey. And she had come a long way, was changing, and it wasn't as easy to keep up with the demanding routines as it had been before. She wasn't just doing this for herself. She was doing it for her team, for the chance to show that she could still be the cheerleader they knew and loved. She had made a commitment to this team, and she was determined to honor it. As the competition drew closer, Emma's determination paid off. There were moments when she faltered, when the weight of her pregnancy seemed too heavy to carry. But she kept going. She stayed focused, leaning on the support of the few teammates who believed in her. The bond between them grew, though it wasn't without its challenges. As the competition approached, Emma began to see the real impact of her return, not just on the team's performance, but on their unity. Her perseverance had begun to shift their attitudes, slowly but surely. For Coach Carter, it was a humbling experience. He had underestimated Emma. He had been quick to judge her, to assume that her pregnancy would hold her back, but now he saw how wrong he had been. She was a force to be reckoned with, not despite her pregnancy, but because of it. Her resilience, her determination, had inspired the team to push harder and work together. But as the day of the competition arrived, Emma still wasn't sure if she could fully trust that the team had accepted her. The real test would come when they were on the mat, facing the challenge together. Could they pull it off? Could they win, despite everything that had happened? There was still a long road ahead, But Emma had learned one crucial lesson. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being willing to fight for what you believed in, no matter the odds. And as the team lined up for their final performance, Emma knew that, win or lose, she had already proven something far more important. The competition day had arrived, and with it, an overwhelming mix of emotions for Emma. She was standing on the edge of something that could either be her redemption or her downfall. The gymnasium was alive with energy, filled with the sound of excited chatter and the smell of fresh popcorn. Cheerleaders from dozens of schools lined the hallways, stretching and practicing their routines one last time before they hit the mat. For Emma, it wasn't just about competing. It was about proving herself, not just to the team, but to herself. She had been given a second chance, and she was determined to make the most of it. As the team gathered for their final warm-up, Emma stood off to the side, watching her teammates. The air was thick with anticipation. The energy in the room was infectious, but Emma still felt that underlying tension. She had spent weeks pushing herself to the limit, fighting against doubts, both her own and those of the people around her. Despite her hard work, she knew there were still some who didn't believe she could pull this off, that her pregnancy was more of a hindrance than a help. They didn't see the months of effort, the hours of sweat and tears. They didn't see the long nights she had spent practicing alone, perfecting each move in front of her bedroom mirror. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was what was about to happen next. The team gathered in a circle, and Coach Carter stepped forward, his face a mixture of determination and uncertainty. This was it, the moment of truth. His eyes scanned the team, and then landed on Emma, who was standing in the back, trying to steady her breathing. "All right, ladies," he said, his voice steady, though there was a slight tremor of anxiety behind his words. "This is what we've worked for. We've had our struggles, but we've come this far together. No one gets left behind, not today. We've got one shot at this, so let's make it count." The girls nodded, their faces set in grim determination. They knew what was at stake, not just for their team, but for the coach. This was more than just a competition. It was about pride. It was about unity. And for Emma, it was about showing everyone, including herself, that she was more than just a pregnant teenager. She was a cheerleader. She belonged here. As the squad walked to the mat, Emma felt a rush of adrenaline. The crowd's energy was overwhelming, the sound of their cheers and applause blending into a deafening roar. The weeks following the competition were filled with a mix of emotions for both Emma and Coach Carter. While the team had managed to pull off an impressive performance, the true aftermath of the decision to bring Emma back onto the squad began to set in. The tension that had once filled the gym seemed to settle, but it was clear that the fallout from the initial decision would continue to ripple through their lives in unexpected ways. For Emma, the victory was bittersweet. She had earned her place back on the team, but the wounds from being kicked off still lingered in the back of her mind. The hours spent training alone, the whispered doubts from her teammates, and the sense of being a distraction to everyone else had never quite left her. She had proved herself in the most visible way possible, on the competition mat, but that didn't erase the feeling of being singled out for something beyond her control. The whispers that had started when she first told her coach about her pregnancy didn't just disappear. They had shifted. Some of the girls on the squad still didn't fully accept her back, still saw her as a liability, and that divide was more subtle but just as real. Emma began to feel like an outsider in her own team, a place she had once felt entirely at home. Despite these challenges, Emma continued to show up to practice every day with the same determination she had shown at the competition. She pushed herself harder, working to maintain her physical strength and cheerleading abilities while carrying the added weight of pregnancy. She felt her body changing every day. Some movements were harder than others, and fatigue often settled in faster than it used to. But each time she felt weak, she reminded herself that she had made it this far. She had earned the right to be there. It didn't matter if some of the girls still weren't entirely on board. She was there to stay. The issue, however, wasn't just Emma's struggle to be accepted, it was Coach Carter's. He had made the decision to bring her back, to ask the team to support her despite everything. But the truth was, he had never fully realized the extent of the consequences. His decision had been impulsive, based on his regret and a desire to right a wrong, but it hadn't accounted for the emotional toll it would take on everyone involved. The rift between him and his team had deepened, and now it wasn't just Emma who was caught in the middle, it was him too. Coach Carter's leadership was being questioned in ways he had never anticipated. His usual unshakable confidence was gone, replaced by doubt and uncertainty. The team's trust in him had been fractured when he had made the decision to kick Emma off, and though he tried to rebuild it, it wasn't as simple as showing up with an apology. The tension on the sidelines, the divided loyalties of the girls, the quiet resentments, it all started to wear him down. He began to question whether he was the right leader for this team, wondering if his old-school values of discipline and commitment were outdated in a world that was changing rapidly. The regret he had started feeling when he first kicked Emma off the team had deepened, but it was no longer just about Emma. It was about his entire role as the team's coach. In one particularly difficult practice, after a rough series of missed moves and frustrated exchanges between teammates, Coach Carter called a break. The squad sat in silence as he paced the floor, his brow furrowed. Emma could see the strain in his face. He wasn't just carrying the weight of the team's performance. He was carrying the weight of his own decisions. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than usual, more vulnerable. "I've been thinking," he began, his eyes scanning the team. "I made a mistake. I made that call without thinking about how it would affect all of you. I wanted to fix it by bringing Emma back, but I didn't consider how that might affect the rest of the team. I thought I could make everything right. But I guess I didn't understand how deep the wounds went." The room was quiet as the girls processed his words. Some of them looked uncomfortable, unsure of how to respond, while others nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. It was clear that they were all caught in the same struggle. There were no easy answers, no quick fixes. Trust, once broken, was difficult to rebuild. Emma, standing off to the side, couldn't help but feel a strange sense of gratitude toward Coach Carter. He hadn't tried to deny the situation or sweep it under the rug. He had acknowledged his mistake and was taking responsibility. That in itself was a kind of strength that Emma hadn't expected to see. She had come to realize that she wasn't just fighting for a spot on the team. She was fighting for respect. Her respect as a cheerleader, as a teammate, and as a person. But rebuilding trust wasn't something that happened overnight. The weeks that followed were a roller coaster of emotions for the team. Some practices went smoothly, and Emma felt the sense of unity she had longed for. But others were fraught with tension. It was clear that some of her teammates hadn't fully forgiven her for her absence or her perceived disruption to the team's focus. And though Emma tried to keep pushing forward, she couldn't ignore the lingering distance between her and the other girls. It wasn't just the physical exertion of practice that was difficult now. It was the emotional labor of trying to rebuild relationships that had been fractured in ways that she wasn't sure how to fix. The coach, too, began to realize that restoring the team's unity wasn't as simple as making an apology. His leadership had been tested, and while some of the girls respected his attempt to make things right, others questioned his decision-making. Could they still trust him to lead them through the challenges ahead? Could Emma, the girl who had been rejected so easily, truly find her place in a team that was still learning how to accept her back? And was Coach Carter really the leader they needed, or had his inability to handle the situation from the start made him more of a liability than an asset? It wasn't until the end of the season that Emma and Coach Carter both realized the depth of the lessons they had learned. For Emma, the experience had been transformative. She had learned what it meant to fight for herself, to stand firm in her own worth despite being told she wasn't good enough. She had learned that strength wasn't just physical, it was mental and emotional. She had learned that sometimes the hardest battles weren't against rivals on the competition floor. They were against the doubts and judgments from the people closest to you. For Coach Carter, the journey was just as humbling. He had always believed that leadership meant being firm, being decisive. But now he saw that true leadership wasn't about control. It was about understanding. It was about knowing when to be tough, but also knowing when to be compassionate. He had learned that sometimes the right decision wasn't the easiest one to make, and that true strength came from accepting your mistakes and making the effort to learn from them. As the season wrapped up, there were no grand gestures or dramatic conclusions. The team had finished the year stronger than they had been at the start, not because they had won every competition, but because they had learned to work through their differences. Emma had earned her place back, but more importantly, she had earned the respect of her teammates. The wounds weren't fully healed, but they had begun to mend. And for Emma, that was enough. It had taken time, it had taken effort, but in the end, she had found something far more valuable than a trophy. She had found her place, and for Coach Carter, that realization was the beginning of something bigger. His own journey toward becoming the kind of leader who could understand, support, and guide his team, no matter the challenges they faced. As the year came to a close, Emma's life began to take shape in ways she hadn't expected. The weeks since the competition had been a blur of mixed emotions, yet looking back, she realized that her journey wasn't just about getting back on the cheerleading team. It was about discovering her own resilience and understanding the true nature of belonging. For the first time, she understood that the fight wasn't only for acceptance. It was for self-acceptance, to prove to herself that she was capable of achieving her dreams, even when life took unexpected turns. The most surprising change was in Coach Carter. The tough, no-nonsense leader who had once demanded perfection from his team was no longer just a coach. He had become a mentor, someone who saw more than just athletic potential. He saw people. He understood that leadership wasn't about giving orders. It was about listening, about adapting, and about caring for the well-being of those you led. It was clear that Emma's return had affected him deeply. He had seen how hard she had fought, not just to return to the team, but to prove to everyone, including himself, that she was more than her circumstances. Her determination had shifted something in him, showing him that leadership meant standing by your people, even when it was difficult. Yet, despite all the progress, there was still a lingering sense of uncertainty. Emma had proven her strength on the mat, but now she faced a different kind of challenge. Her pregnancy wasn't something she could ignore. It was a constant reminder of how much her life had changed. There were days when the weight of her responsibilities felt overwhelming, when the uncertainty of the future seemed like an insurmountable obstacle. She was no longer just a cheerleader fighting for a spot on the team. She was going to be a mother. And that change brought with it an entirely new set of challenges and emotions that she wasn't sure how to navigate. She often wondered if she was making the right decisions. Would she be able to balance motherhood with her future dreams? Could she still pursue her aspirations while being a responsible mother? These were the questions that weighed on her as she walked through the hallways of her high school, knowing that her life was about to shift in ways she couldn't yet understand. The community around her, too, had changed. The whispers that had once surrounded her, questioning her ability to continue on the cheerleading squad, had quieted. Some of her classmates had come to understand that her strength and resilience were far greater than they had originally given her credit for. But others still treated her with an undercurrent of pity, as if her pregnancy was something she needed to apologize for. Emma had learned to ignore those who judged her without truly understanding her journey. She knew that her worth wasn't defined by their opinions. What mattered was how she saw herself, and she was beginning to see herself differently. She was strong, capable, and ready for whatever came next. As the final days of her high school career drew near, Emma took a step back and reflected on everything that had happened. She had gone through what felt like an impossible battle, facing rejection, uncertainty, and self-doubt. But through it all, she had grown stronger, more determined, and more self-aware. She realized that the person she had become wasn't just a cheerleader or a pregnant teenager. She was someone who had fought to carve out her place, in a world that often felt too small to contain her dreams. Her decision to continue with cheerleading, despite the obstacles, had opened a door for her. But more importantly, it had opened her eyes to the power of resilience. She had faced adversity head-on and come out stronger. That was the true victory, one that couldn't be measured by a trophy or a ranking on a scoreboard. It was the victory of self-belief, the realization that she was capable of so much more than she had ever imagined. Coach Carter, too, had changed. The once rigid coach who saw everything in terms of wins and losses had learned that sometimes the most important victories weren't the ones you could see. He had learned the value of empathy, of listening to his players, and of recognizing the humanity in every decision he made. He had made mistakes, but he had also grown from them. It wasn't easy, but it had been necessary for both him and the team to move forward. And now he had a deeper understanding of what it meant to be a leader, not someone who simply commanded respect, but someone who earned it by showing compassion and understanding. In the final weeks of the school year, Emma's friends gathered around her, offering their support as she prepared for the next chapter of her life. It wasn't just about graduation. It was about stepping into a future that was still uncertain but filled with possibility. Some of them still couldn't fully understand the challenges she faced, but they respected her for how far she had come. They had watched her fight for a place on the team, fight for her future, and fight for the life she wanted to create for herself and her child. As she sat with her friends, reflecting on everything that had led her to this point, Emma felt a surge of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons she had learned, for the people who had stood by her, and for the strength she had found within herself. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, that there would be challenges she hadn't yet anticipated, but she also knew that she was ready. She had proven to herself that she was capable of facing whatever life threw her way. As graduation day arrived, Emma stood with her classmates, her heart filled with pride. She had made it through the hardest years of her life. And now, as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she felt the weight of everything she had accomplished. She wasn't just walking across the stage as a high school graduate. She was walking toward a future that she had fought for, a future where she could continue to grow, to dream, and to build the life she wanted. In the end, it wasn't the cheerleading squad or the competition results that defined Emma. It was her journey. The decision to fight for herself, to face the challenges that seemed insurmountable, and to never give up, no matter how many times she was knocked down, was what made her truly victorious. She had proven that strength didn't come from perfection, but from the willingness to keep moving forward, even when the road seemed impossible. As Emma looked toward the future, she knew one thing for certain. She was ready to embrace the challenges of motherhood, to continue pursuing her dreams, and to live her life on her terms. And as for Coach Carter, he knew that this season had been a turning point, not just for Emma, but for him as well. He had learned that true leadership wasn't about making the easy decisions. It was about making the right ones, even when they were hard. And for Emma and the entire team, the lessons they had learned over the course of that year would stay with them long after the final performance. In the end, it wasn't just about the victories they had earned. It was about the growth they had experienced together. And as Emma stepped into the future, she knew that the journey had only just begun. The road ahead was hers to walk, and she was ready for whatever came next.